Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of Sound Design Monday. I am your host Sansworld and today we're creating this bass. Lower octave. So those are the octaves. In order for the bass to work, you're going to need a funky groove in order to make it work like Merk and Kremont did. And that's the bass we're creating today, the bass from Zunami. Before we get started, I would like to ask if you guys could please like my Facebook page. I have all the presets up on there. I also have a couple of sound banks for free, each containing more than 30 sounds. I also put all the presets from my tutorials up on there, so just make sure to check it out. I also have a Twitter that you may follow if you choose to. And also, I'm going to be starting a new podcast called The Evolution of Sound, which will feature up-and-coming producers, tracks that haven't been signed. And it's a way for you guys to be heard and also some motivation for you guys to finish your tracks. The expected release date for that is late February. And if you want to get on the first podcast, then please make sure to have your submission no later than February 10. Anyways, guys, let's get started. So here we have silent 1. Normal silent 1. What we're going to do is we're going to create this Merk and Kremont bass. The magic is going to happen through the envelope section. This is where the sound is going to get its characteristics. Okay, so first things first. So in oscillator A1, we're going to have a saw wave with 8 voices, and we're going to leave the retrig on. All the retrig does is it makes sure that this oscillator starts over again the phase section. So if you put it on all of them, they all are going to sound huge. And generally you want to have the retrig on for your basses. A lot of times when I'm doing the sound design and I try to explain it in down-to-earth terms, not trying to explain it the technical way, is go by what it makes the sound like. So the retrig is going to make this sound bigger, and it's going to keep it more together as if it were off. If it were off, the saw wave would kind of spread out. But with the retrig on, it sounds like it's been put in mono. And usually you leave retrig on for basses, or you leave the retrig on for the lower part of your sound. So if an oscillator A1, we have a sign that's going to act as a sub for a lead, then make sure that sign is in retrig for it to sound huge and give the sub effect. So that's a quick tip there. So for the volume for this one, the volume is going to be set to around 3 o'clock. Phase all the way down, deepen all the way up. We're going to pan this one to the left by 1.90, negative 1.90, and it goes to the left. Okay. The reason we decrease the volume here is because we have 8 voices, and the more voices you have, the more unison there is. In other words, it's going to be louder. Okay, so in oscillator B1, we're going to have, here, let me put this up here. In oscillator B1, we're going to have a saw wave again, 8 voices, retrig on, no panning, stereo the same, detuned the same. You want to put your volume all the way down and just up it a little bit by like a value of, let's say around 1. Okay, now for our amp envelope A, our attack is going to be set 0.05. It should be like that by default. Your decay is going to be all the way up, sustain all the way up, and then your release is going to be set to 1.36. Now here we go to filter A. We're going to have a bandpass filter. What a bandpass filter is, it's a low pass and a high pass put together. And generally when you're using bandpass filters, the whole point of it is, let's say you like the high end of a sound but you don't like the lower end, you'll use a high pass filter, and then you'll move the cutoff more to the right to get more of the highs. But let's say you want more of the lows and get rid of some of the highs, and you can go to the left. So a bandpass filter helps us do that, and that's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to set a 24 dB bandpass filter to input select A. We're going to put the cutoff at 5.53 hertz or 9 o'clock, so we're going to move it to the left. Next, we go into our filter control. We're going to put the cutoff at 3 o'clock as well, resonance at 0.62. Our key check is going to be set to 2.05, and we're not going to be having any drive on this. So once we have that, now we move on to part B. So now we go into oscillator 1, and we go into our wave, and we're going to be applying some white noise with 1 voice, retrig on. And pretty much you're going to leave everything the same except the volume, which is going to be lowered to 0.43. The reason the volume on the white noise is really low is because white noise tends to cover a lot of the higher frequencies. And in general, and you can test this out yourself, is is that when you have a bass and you put it at the same value that you will put a lead, the lead's going to sound way, way, way louder than that bass. And the reason for that is because we can hear higher frequencies at lower volumes better than lower frequencies. So if you have a low frequency and you have a bass, you need to pump the bass up, if you notice. So usually when you're seeing mixing, usually lower frequencies go at higher volumes in order for them to come out more. Okay, so that's the whole purpose of that. Now we're going to our amp envelope beat, which is going to be attack set to 0.11, decay all the way down, sustain all the way up, and release at 0.10. We should be there by default. Don't worry about oscillator B1. We're not going to be using it. I just left it there when I created the sound. Now we're going to filter B. We're going to be applying a low pass filter. Generally what a low pass filter does is it gets rid of the highs first as you go from right to left. And the last thing you'll hear before you shut the filter off to 0 is the low end. Okay, so we're going to be putting that to 12 o'clock, no resonance, no drive, and a 24 dB type filter. Okay. So once we have that, now the next thing we are going to go into is going to be our mod envelope A, and this is where the sound is going to get its characteristics. This needs to be perfect or else you're not going to get the same result as I did here. So what you're going to do is you're going to put cutoff AB to be modulated by the envelope characteristics here, and we're going to turn this all the way to the right. So the black knob all the way to the right. So generally what's going to happen here is we are going to pretty much assign this envelope onto one of the knobs, which is going to be our cutoff knob in this situation. And we're going to change it over time to these characteristics. ADSR, which stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release, is a very, very important part of sound design, and I suggest you guys learn what happens in each of those phases. I've explained it in almost all my tutorials before this one, so make sure to check those out to get more of an understanding. I also have a Chance Design episode 2 where I get really into it and explain everything by detail, the 4 phases. But just for a quick summary here, our attack is going to decide how fast the cutoffs are going to change to this value of 10.00, which can be all the way up. Our decay is going to decide how fast it goes down to the sustain level. And then from our sustain level, the release is going to decide how fast it goes back to normal value. So how fast the knob returns back to where it was before it's played again, and then it changes. So every time you hit a note, this is going to work, and it happens really fast. And generally, you want something like this. Generally, when you're trying to make plucks, usually your decay is going to be low and so forth. So this is kind of like a plucky bass. That's the reason for that. Okay, so here are the values. So our attack is 0.00. So generally what that means is the cutoff is going to be turned, the value of the cutoff is going to be turned instantly to the value of this 10.00, which is going to look like this. Okay. Next, we go into our decay section, which is 2.18. So once it's here, it's going to go down to the sustain level, which is 4.43. So let's say this is our sustain level here. And then it's going to release 2.87. So it's going to release and go like back here. Okay. And all of this happens really fast. So our release 2.87, sustain 4.43, our decay is 2.18, and our attack is set at 0.00. Once we have that, now we go into the distortion section of Silent 1. Distortion, generally what it does, it lowers bitrate of the sound. So generally speaking, I'm sure many of you used to play video games, and I'm sure you hear the music in a PS3 compared to the music in the Super Nintendo. I think the Super Nintendo is 16-bit, 32-bit, I'm not sure. I know the N64 is 64-bit. But generally speaking, if you hear the music and you go from the N64's music down to, like, let's say the Atari, which is 8-bit, you're going to hear the quality kind of diminish, but at the same time, the sounds are going to sound sharper and more fierce. So this is how you get what distortion does. It lowers the bit rate of sounds. So here we're going to be applying a decimate, and we're going to set the distortion amount to 1.52, which is 9 o'clock, and our dry and wet to 80.95%, which is 3 o'clock. Next, we go into our phase section, and pretty much everything's going to remain the same. You're just going to put it at 13.87%. Just make sure your LFO rate here is 2 to 1. Phaser LFO gain to 2. Phaser feedback 24.29%. Next, we go into the EQ section. The EQ section of any synthesizer is really, really important, because this is where you get to kind of make certain things come out of the sound. So here what we did is we lowered the bass a bit. The EQ bass is at 5.36 dB. at the frequency of 25.41 hertz. And then we EQ treble at 12.36 dB. And the frequency set is 1116.07 hertz. Next, we go into our reverb, which is going to be set dry and wet to 53.81%. Our reverb pre-delay before the reverb starts, 0.95. Reverb dampness is going to be set at 0. The reverb size, 1.12. Reverb width, 100%. And finally, we're going to add some compression to the sound. Our compression ratio is going to be 100 to 1. Our threshold is negative 15 dB. Our attack is going to be set to 0.10 milliseconds, so the compressor is going to work really fast. And our release is going to be set to 150.7 milliseconds, okay? So once we have all that, the last thing to do is just mess with the mixer here. We're going to put mix A all the way up, and we're going to leave mix B at 4.37 or in the center. And once we have that, we should have this sound. Okay guys, so hopefully this tutorial was helpful for you guys. Hopefully you learned something new. The preset will be available for download on my Facebook page at www.facebook.com/zenworldmusic. Make sure to also download the sound banks on there. I've gotten a lot of great reviews on them, and there's a lot of big room house, trance, and progressive house presets on there. Anyways guys, this has been the Sound Design Monday, episode 25 or 26. I've already lost count. Hopefully you guys enjoy the sound. Next week, we're going to be looking at Dioro's Dichoro sound, so make sure to stick around and check that out. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. This has been Zenworld, and I'll see you guys next week.